Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Just making sure all of everybody's audio is all good. I think we are. And I'd like to officially call this meeting to order at 2:32 p.m. on the 5th day of October. Today's meeting is a special meeting of council, and we are facilitating our workshop session number 2 regarding our Muskoka Lakes strategy, respecting a review of district municipal services. I do want to confirm that council is all here, save and except Councillor Nishikawa. We have not had regrets from her, so hopefully she'll be able to join us. Also, we have a number of people from Strategy Corp. John Matheson is with us today, Michael Fenn and Chris Loretto joining us. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. Do also want to acknowledge that we are on lands traditionally occupied by Indigenous peoples, and it's been Indigenous peoples who have cared for this territory for the benefit of future generations. Their stewardship throughout the ages is recognized. We do know that today's meeting is live streamed, so anybody who's on or delegates today, you're consenting to your image being used. And save, we have not received any public comments, and there is no supplementary agenda. But I will ask council if we have any declaration of pecuniary interest today. Not seeing any. I've already mentioned our delegates who are here today. I'm going to start by one resolution moved by Councillor Bridgman, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that pursuant to Section 232 Township's Procedural Bylaw 2019-79 as amended, the rules of procedure are hereby suspended for the duration of the District of Muskoka Services discussion, and that they be reinstated at the conclusion of the discussion. Council, all in favor? Madam Clerk, I believe we're carried. Thank you. Appreciate that. And as we move into today, at the last council meeting we had, or at the last strategy meeting in this particular, I know we had a number of discussions about why are we here, what are we trying to do. We tried to understand a little bit more. It seemed like, especially the district councillors who were chiming up a little bit to say, you know, I know all this information, tell us something new. I just want to go back to where we started briefly. And I know I've had a couple of conversations with a couple of councillors already on this. And that is that this was part of our strategic plan, that we talk about strengthening relationships and working better with the District of Muskoka. We certainly know we pay a lot of taxes to the district. And we pay a lot to the province for that matter in education. So as a foundation in our strategic plan, what we're really trying to do is make sure that we are delivering the best value for the dollar we can for our ratepayers. And I think that's really the foundation of why we're here. And some of it may seem rudimentary and very, very basic at times, but I think it's the foundation for us to springboard to, with the help of Strategy Corp, try and find some opportunities in areas where we may focus our own efforts or ask the district to focus efforts to make sure that we continue to deliver the best dollar for dollar value we can. So with that, I believe I'm going to turn it over to Chris Loretto. Chris, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship, and it's great to be back with everybody for workshop number 2. Just a quick question, Cheryl, is it possible for me to be granted screen sharing privileges?
That's a very big ask, but I think we will be able to do that. So
okay,
we're in the process of doing that right now. Use it carefully, my friend.
I shall use it wisely. There we go. Perfect. Hopefully everybody can see the screen. So this is where, as the mayor introduced, this is workshop number 2, looking at and trying to come to some conclusion on what the township's strategy should be relative to the services that are delivered by the district. And it comes out of the strategic plan, the building relationships pillar of that plan. And what I want to do today with council is really focus in on where what areas of service you may want to look at either through a services review at the district level, or look at different ways through your district representatives on district council of trying to come up with models that will strengthen the value for money that is being delivered in those service areas. So in terms of the workshop here today, I'll go through and just refresh folks on what our objectives are, what we're trying to achieve with this exercise. I'll review some of the outputs of the discussion from the first workshop from a few weeks ago and some of the updated underlying facts based on the discussion that we did have with council at the first workshop. And then we'll spend the bulk of our time looking at the services that the district delivers and having a discussion on what we want to prioritize in terms of looking at strengthening the value that township taxpayers get from their contributions to the district. Also seek to identify what is the fundamental underlying issue or issues that are of concern that need to be addressed with respect to those areas of service, and then talk about what some of the possible strategic approaches are to looking at those services and addressing those underlying issues that are identified. The more and more we think that we've thought about this as your advisors here, the more I think we've come to the conclusion that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach in terms of a strategy vis-a-vis the district, and that there is probably a number of different streams or lanes that you'll need to be or you'll want to be active in order to address the concerns that you do have and ultimately try to ensure that taxpayers are getting maximum value for money for the services that they're supporting through their tax dollars. So just to refresh council in terms of why you're undertaking this exercise. As I said, this comes straight out of the strategic plan. The goal here in having these discussions is to think through whether or not the township can, for its taxpayers, achieve a greater value for money for the services that are delivered, particularly by the district, and understanding what needs to be true in order to strengthen that value for money equation on services that are delivered by the district. And the output of this project is to be a strategic approach that can be adopted by council to address the governance, fiscal, programmatic, or other issues in its relationship with the district. So let me just start briefly with, just refreshing folks on some of the information that we presented at workshop one, and then how we distilled the conversation that we did have through the first workshop. As you'll recall, we presented some information on, what percentage of the district levy is funded by the township's taxpayers, and Councillor Jaglowitz made a very good point about separating the general levy out from the special levies that are in effect, that more appropriately tags who funds what to who is the beneficiary of the services. And so there is the general purpose levy based on our look at the numbers that the township's taxpayers account for 37% of the contributions to that general levy. And then there's special levies in place for water, sewer, and waste management. And the township is a contributor of 8% of the special levy for water, 8% for sewer, and 20% for waste management. And as we'd like to remind folks, the contribution that the township's taxpayers make to the district levies and special levies, but the general levy in particular, is defined by legislation. Under the Municipal Act, there is a form of progressive taxation, for a lack of a better term, in terms of how lower tier taxpayers contribute to the district levy, and it's based on assessment value. And so those that have those communities that are more assessment rich will pay more and contribute more to the district levy than those that are less rich in assessment. And so that is the phenomenon that you are experiencing as a township. I'll just pause there because I see your worship, Councillor Jaglowicz's hand is up.
Thank you for that. Councillor Jagowitz, you have a question.
Yes, thank you. Is this a good time to ask it, or are we till the end, or it's on this one?
I think this slide, this is an appropriate time.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank consultants for breaking those numbers out. I think that gives us a better picture. And I'd just like to make a comment that when you look at the general purpose levy, that's based on assessment, and as indicated, we pay 37%. When you look at water and sewer, that depends on who's hooked up to it. So that's why we're both 8%. Most people have water, have sewer. So that's really, it shouldn't even be in this discussion, because those are services that if people get them, they pay for them. But the interesting thing is when you look at waste management, everybody in the district, or most, I would say, I think there may be one small municipality that doesn't participate, but that's pretty well the whole district. And you'll see that our share is 20%, because our share of the households and population is approximately in that 20% range. So that's a good example of service that is provided to most people in the district, but yet is shared on a basis other than on the levy. And I just want to point that out, because in my view, there are other services that are in that 37% that should probably be moved to that category. And we will discuss that when we get further on. So once again, thank you for revising these numbers. I think it's been helpful.
Thank you, Council. Okay. In terms of the growth of the upper tier levy contributions, as we said last time, the growth has been consistent across the lower tiers over the last 5 years as assessments have grown, and all lower tiers have had the benefit of increasing assessments. There's been more of everybody's experienced an overall contribution to the district. There's been no kind of one breakout, but there has been some subtle change in who contributes what over times, but nothing substantial. We're still dealing with a situation where you're the largest contributor to the general levy, and as Councillor Jagowitz said, it's purpose here is to look at what are we funding through that, and is the general levy the best way to fund it, or are there alternative models? And those alternative models will be based on what is both permissible under legislation, but also what might make sense in terms of how you can allocate and recover those costs. Just a quick refresher here. This hasn't changed since, just in terms of where the net levy goes in terms of contributions to various services. Roads and roads maintenance is by far the two largest categories. Community services, less so the planning service, but the community and planning services function that the district delivers is also a significant service area that the general levy is used to fund, as well as police services. So this shows the year-over-year change in the budgets of those respective, or at least the net levy contributions to those budgets over the last 3 years. And then when we look at things in their totality, by building in not just what is funded through the levy, but what is also funded through fee revenues and provincial transfers, environmental services and social and family services become the largest overall spends. But that is reflective of the fact that there are user fees attached to those things, and also provincial transfers, because most of what you deliver under social and family services is provincially mandated and cost shared with the province of Ontario. You can see on here, what has grown, over a 5 year period. As is the case, a number of things have increased in terms of their overall budget. family and social services up by about 23%, transportation services as well, which again is fairly dependent on the general levy, has increased almost 16% on average over a 5-year period. So anytime that spends are growing significantly over a period, it's always worthwhile to look at those and understand what the fundamental underlying drivers of those cost increases are. We haven't delved into that. That is a pretty involved exercise, but I'm sure you have a sense, in the roles that you occupy, but also maybe some of the district councilors understand what is driving that. Certainly needs around capital and maintenance for transportation services, but also growing community needs on social and family services is not unique to your community. Those are areas that a lot of communities across the province are facing cost increases in. So in terms of our first workshop conversation, and it was meant to be foundational and to begin to identify, some of the areas you might want to look at, but we did kind of talk about what your options are to consider in terms of how you approach some of these things. And we outlined kind of four broad categories of potential action that you could take depending on the service, the service that you're looking at in particular. There's always the political means of addressing things, and that's about building alliances with other similarly situated area municipalities within the district, and really looking at something in terms of improving it at the district council table, or in those cases where there is a provincial role or a provincial mandate involved, looking at whether or not the fiscal relationship with the province is a fair one, and whether or not there are areas where either the province needs to increase its funding or the province needs to look at repatriating some of the service that is being delivered. There's service delivery is the next bucket, looking at things like, I know this is a horrible term from 25 years back, but who does what, right? Is there a potential for a service migration to the district, or a service migration away from the district back to the lower tiers? Are there opportunities to look at making sure you're pegging things more to those who are using the service versus putting those types of things on the general levy and spreading the cost across everybody? And then there's service levels themselves. Are we over servicing, perhaps in some cases under servicing, or are we servicing just right? There's also, it says service delivery here, but there are fiscal relationships that aren't often used, but there are potential within the upper tier budget to look at things like cost compensation grants to assist area municipalities that have extraordinary burdens related to it. Doesn't happen that often, but if you think creatively and making sure it's kind of on side with the Municipal Act, there may be some fiscal compensation between the tiers that makes sense. And then there are the structural. It's deliberately the fourth bucket, because this is the toughest bucket to approach, because you are dealing with things that are legislated or regulated, and very difficult to turn, because it's not just your decision as to what you want to do. You also need to, in the case of dissolving the district or going to a single tier type of system, looking at things like a triple majority, where it's not just, you need a majority of your votes on council, but you need a majority of councils in the lower tier plus the district council to agree to any fundamental restructuring outside of the province doing itself through changes to the Municipal Act. So any fundamental restructuring, you are venturing into deliberately difficult territory by the province, set up through legislation or regulation to make any changes. We provided those for context in terms of looking at how you might want to approach some of the service areas that you do have concerns about. In terms of the discussion we had, it was noted, and we took away as kind of the major themes from the conversation that council did have, is that the service delivery relationship amongst the township, the district, and the province is shifting. It's always shifting. And so, we provided this pictograph that was provided that the district uses And a number of folks mentioned, listen, there's increasingly pressures coming down that are things that are either strictly within the bailiwick of the province or strictly within the bailiwick, increasingly blurred lines in terms of who's funding what. Hospitals and healthcare is an example, social services. The focus of the review, it was noted, of the fiscal relationship with the district is to make sure that every tax dollar is being spent efficiently and effectively, and that we are funding services from the right pots. As I was talking a little bit about earlier, things that are appropriate on the general levy, things that are appropriate through user fees, or things that are more appropriately the purview and the jurisdiction of another level of government. And then lastly, in terms of the takeaways that we heard is, there's a desire to review the efficiency and effectiveness of some of the larger spends that the district has. We mentioned roads, policing, social services, healthcare services, and to look at having the district examine ways to more fairly allocate costs beyond the general levy. I'll stop there, Your Worship. I see a hand up.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Jegowitz.
Thank you, Chair. Could we go back to slide 13 just for a minute? I believe at that last meeting, I made a comment that would have created a subcategory. When you look at the structure, the last bullet there says change basis on which district levy is assessed. And that's assuming that would require some legislative change or some major majority or something. However, I raised the issue, I don't know if I had agreement or not, that there's another subcategory that could probably be closer to the top under political. And because I believe it's a fairly easy category. And that's what I call flow through costs. In other words, and I'm talking about things like policing, hospital, long-term care, fair burn, which is a second home, not mandated that the district do it, MPAC, which is a flow through billing, and the health council billing. And those are costs that the district doesn't add any value to. They merely flow them through. And I think there may not have been agreement in the meeting, but I think there should be some discussion on whether that's not as someone mentioned, maybe low-hanging fruit that maybe should be up in that top category. And I think I would like some consideration given to that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure, Chris, if you want to comment on that or not. I think what I'm hearing is potentially an additional category that identifies certain costs that are just paid by the district that are actually services of each of the lower tier municipalities.
I'm going to ask Michael to chime in here, if that's okay, Your Worship.
Absolutely. Chair meeting.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, Your Worship. I guess the councillor will also be aware that the flow-through costs, by their nature, tend to be ones in which the quantum is fixed. The discussion is around what the basis on which it should be allocated. So one of the challenges of making those kinds of political or structural changes is it's a zero-sum exercise. If you come up with a formula that is better for Muskoka Lakes or better for the 3 townships, it inevitably means somebody else has to pay more in order to make up the sum total, unless you anticipate some way to make the policing, the OPP invoice smaller or the MPAC invoice smaller or something of that kind. So I guess I would say it's not so much a question of legislation so much as a question of political skill. You have to persuade people to pay more in order to have some people pay less.
Go to Councillor Jagos just for a follow-up, and then Councillor Zavitz.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. You're correct, and that's why I would put those under political as opposed to structural. An example of that is that if we look at the waste management, it is done on a special levy basis, because the level of service is somewhat different in each area municipality. And what I'm suggesting when you go to policing, that the level of service in the Township of Muskoka Lake should be different than in the town of Huntsville. And by making those service levels different, that would then qualify it to be a special levy. In my view, by the way, I'm not quoting anyone myself. So I would like to see those up in the first category, the subcategory under political, because I believe we could put some effort there and we might actually achieve something. The ones in the structural category are probably just spinning our wheels. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Through you. Perhaps a political will or political skill, one of the two, Michael. Not sure which at this point. I do want to refer back to the police services and our simple $30-some million contribution. I'm not so sure that it's, and again, and not to revisit the whole theory here, it's not that we're paying too much. Let's set that aside for the moment. It's what are we getting for it, and where does our 30 fit into someone else's 12? And I think that's an underlying piece of this puzzle. It's not to say that there are 17 police cars on Highway 169 between Torrance and Bella right now, and there's only 3 in Bracebridge. That's because we pay more. That isn't how it works. And I think that I respectfully to my good friend, Mr. Jaglowitz, Councillor Jaglowitz, that I think that's what he's saying too, that we're not trying to tear this thing apart and blow it up, but we do want to see that value for dollar. And how does one quantify that? So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing in the exercise we're about to do, Councillor Zavitz and Councillors Jaglowitz, that we can't apply that lens on it. And it's more about matching service levels, who's receiving the greater benefit of the service back to then who should be paying it, right? And in which case you're not looking at a general levy, you're looking at a special levy or fees or some other cost recovery model to support that. So the framework I think we've set up for the discussion on where we want to look and how we want to look at it, I think it underscores the point that there is no cookie cutter to these issues. The underlying issues and the approach to those issues varies from service to service. And in some cases, we don't have necessarily the information we need today to say, this is the way it should be cut. But part of the exercise is if this is an area we think needs to be looked at, and is something that hasn't been looked at in a while, then first step is to figure out what is the underlying fact base. What is the service? Who is consuming the service? Is it best supported on a general levy? Is it a special levy? Is it some other form of cost recovery mechanism that we should be looking at based on how that service is being consumed? So we're trying to get to those things, and then other things are going to be more straightforward. It's sometimes it's cost, sometimes it's service, sometimes it's all those kinds of things that have to factor into it.
Let you continue on.
Okay, so that's just the quick, relatively quick refresher on what we covered in the first workshop and then what we took away from the first workshop. So what we want to do today is kind of cut to the chase and get council's view on the areas you'd like to have look at. Get on the table what you believe to be the underlying issue or issues to be addressed. And then look at those in terms of mapping prioritizing them and mapping them against a matrix that we've come up with to try to give us some sense of what the best strategic approach may be. It's not the final strategic approach. We'll take away the discussion today and distill it down and come back with the strategy based on those strategic approaches, based on those prioritized areas for council to review and consider and potentially adopt. So we're going to use 2 frameworks here. The first framework is courtesy of our colleague, John Matheson. It's called the bogus framework, but it's a way of categorizing services. And I'll go through it in just a moment. The second is the issue and solution matrix that I talked about. So what I will do from a facilitation approach is, much like we did with the strategic plan, I'll go through kind of a disciplined speakers list, allow everybody to get their perspectives on table. We'll see if there's areas of consensus or areas of divergence and how to address those. And we'll spend the first part using the bogus framework, identifying services that we think we want to look at. And then the second, really thinking through, okay, based on those services, what is the issue, and how does that match potentially to a solution that to address those underlying issues. John, do you just, if your connection's okay,
Sure.
do you want to explain your brilliance here in terms of the framework, and then I'll facilitate council through the discussion.
Well, sure. I hope people can hear me. I'm in a rather remote part of Quebec today. So the framework was just to answer the question, if you could start anywhere, how would you think about what might be the most prudent place to start when you're looking for things that are worth going after? And of course, one part of this is what we've already talked about in the previous slide, which is, how doable is it? If it feels like it's not going to be doable, that's a reason to move in the other direction. Or if it feels like it's real politically more flexible or more easy to get it done, like Councillor Jaglowitz was saying, that's another reason to think it might be a positive thing. But this is more meant to be taking a look at it from the perspective of the services themselves, and it's relatively straightforward. And what we just suggested was, if you were going to prioritize, you'd start off by looking for big services, because if you could achieve a 10% saving on a significant service, it's way better than a 10% saving on a small service. So that's obviously quite straightforward. Another is, if it hasn't been looked at for a long time, then chances are, if we look at it, there may well be ways to optimize it. Typically that might be a service which is still done using predominantly, the best of 1990s technology, as opposed to taking more advantage of more digital delivery methods. So that's a time where you might be in a situation where you could achieve significant savings simply because the service is an old service that hasn't been reimagined lately. Another one is if it's rapidly growing. I think you've seen the growth of the health function at the county, or for the district in recent years. If something used to be small and it's growing rapidly, and if it seems on pace to continue to grow, then that makes it worthwhile. Obviously, if a service is unsatisfactory, then that is its own reason to look at it, whether it saves any money or not. It may be simply beneficial to remove the irritant of a service that's perceived as being inadequate. And then the other is where things are shared. We've done a lot of service delivery reviews in the last 2 years. And the one thing that comes up again and again is, if you have two layers of government looking at the same thing, chances are there's an opportunity to achieve a more effective service delivery model. And oftentimes you'll say, well, okay, take roads. This is big. It might be old because nobody's looked at it for a while. It's certainly shared. You would know better than me whether it's perceived as satisfactory from an outcomes point of view, and it could also have a rapid pace of cost escalation. Potentially because you're doing a better job of thinking about the lifetime cycle of the assets, and have a greater perception of how much it's going to cost over time. So it's not inconceivable that one service might achieve the big bogus, if you will. It's big, it's old, it's growing, it's unsatisfactory, and it's shared. Others might just have one of them. But this is meant to be, rather than what could we get away with, what politically could we make work. This is meant to look at it from the other end, by focusing on the services themselves and thinking about, is this orange worthy of the squeeze, as they sometimes say. If we direct our attentions at this, is it big enough to be material, or will it just yield a result that's interesting, but frankly not going to change anybody's tax bill by even half a point. So that's what we wanted to suggest to you as being one useful tool for thinking about the prioritization of service reviews in a context like this. Chris?
Okay, thanks, John. So what I want to do then now is go through council and get your perspectives. You don't have to populate a service against all of these. It's just meant to be a way of thinking of things, so you don't have to come up with 5 like the title says. And we'll go through, I'll record them live. And then once we have a list, we'll look at, where there's consensus, where there's divergence. And then we'll go to the next exercise and look at how, what the underlying issues are and how we might approach those underlying issues. So Your Worship, if it's okay, I'm going to ask to start with Councillor Bridgman to get her perspective on services that she thinks might be worth a look at.
Absolutely, Chris. I guess the question is, many of us will have the same services or questions. So to go through all 10, to repeat all 10, maybe just pick a few here and there and make sure we've covered them off is what I'm kind of thinking.
But Your Worship, if it's okay, I'd also like to hear, if it's already posted on the big board, if you can say that was one, because it'll give us a sense of kind of where council's coalescing around certain issues and then where there is some divergence in how we approach that. So, okay, perfect. So Councillor Bridgman, can I pick on you first to kick us off on this?
Sure, you can, Chris, and thank you through you, Mayor Harding. Certainly, we've already talked about police services, so I look at that as a significant part of the budget, and that needs to, I think, be reviewed. Another one that I had written down here also was the health services, because quite frankly, I'm still not clear how this gets downloaded to the province and then how it gets downloaded to the municipality from the district, because I never thought that was part of the deal, so to speak. And then in terms of groups that are unhappy, complaints about the roads is an ongoing major one. I'm not sure we can do anything about it, but you asked the question, so I'm going to give you the answer on that. And my last part, the jointly delivered, I don't know if it's possible again, but it seems to me the planning could be in our own municipality. And if we have a subdivision that comes up, we could either do a consultant to it, but not have to rely on the district. So maybe naive, but those are the ones that came to mind for me.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, and through the chair, I've given this a lot of thought and thinking about the end results, and I think we've got to keep it simple, not have a list of very many. Based on the track record that we've had, trying to convince our partners in the other municipalities, it's going to be a real uphill battle, as your colleague was saying, Ken was saying, is that if we're going to pay less, we got to convince someone else to pay more. That's not going to happen. We got to admit that there's just no way that's going to happen. So I think we should be looking at the police. Like, I would just pick 2, get those like small bite sizes. Get 2, start working with those, and then look at the next one. And I want to definitely look at the pass-through charges. I think the service delivery needs to, we need to look at anything that is just pass-through, where we just have a belly button in the district. That should be downloaded to the townships. Example, policing, and the other one would be impact. On the assessment, anything that's passed through, I want to just focus on those. I think there's 3 or 4 of them, but those would be the 2 that I would start with. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Jeglowitz.
Thank you very much. So in the first category, I echo Barb's 2, policing and health services. Those are large areas. As far as old, I think things like airport property assessment services and the health unit, I think those haven't been looked at in quite a while as to how they should be paid. Keep in mind also, when you look at the airport, it has its own board now. So in effect, it's being managed outside of the district. So it maybe that's something that should be dealt with. We all know the health unit, it's just a bill that's paid. Same with impact property assessment services. Things that are rapidly growing, I agree that the 2 biggest are hospital, which is health, and Fairburn long-term care. And once again, those are growing. Those are provincial things that are being pushed down, and they're just automatically being added to the tax base. I don't think that's fair. In contrast, when you look at areas like Seguin, where they don't have an upper tier, it's very difficult for the province to pass those down. And if they are passed down, they're passed down through a district social services board, of which the municipalities have a say in how it's to be allocated. So that's a fair way. Services that residents are unhappy with. Barb mentioned roads, but I would mention planning. I think people are very unhappy with the 2 levels of planning that they have to go through. And so I concur with that. Once again, services that are jointly delivered, we once again come to planning. They're jointly delivered, and there's a lot of duplication there. And I would like to add I was hoping there'd be a separate category there, as Councillor Roberts has indicated, these pass-through costs. I just wonder if maybe there'd be a notation of the type of costs that are passed through, and you've heard me mention them before. I think they should be there. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you very much, and through you, Your Worship, I have 3 categories that I want to mention. I think all 3 have already been touched, but I will tell you that I kind of categorize my concerns differently than I've heard so far, so just let me share that with you. First of all, road maintenance. My concern there is absolutely the service level. I don't even want to look at the cost. The roads knock the wheels off your cars in a lot of cases, and that's just not good enough. The second issue for me is police services, and really the issue there is one of value. I understand that we're sharing the cost, and it's like a balloon. If it pushes in one side, it pops out the other. But are we actually getting any value or enough value for what we're paying? And is there maybe a different way to deliver the service, i.e. more marine-based than vehicle-based, automobile-based, that without even touching the cost just gives us better value? And the last one that I think Councillor Jagowitz just mentioned is planning. And with planning, I get 2 real concerns. One is the immeasurable cost of duplication. There's a duplication cost here of a whole bunch of people doing the same job in 2 different offices. There's a delay, a cost that comes with the delay of 2 things going on. Even if we think they're simultaneously, they do actually hold each other up. And the last issue really around planning, and I think this is where Councillor Jagowitz was going, is our ability to run the planning decisions completely in line with our understanding of what our constituents want the township to do. I don't think the district has that fine an edge or fine a point on what's expected within this district. It's unique. A lot of it is waterfront based. A lot of it is subject to abuse because of high value. And so my concern on the duplicated services is not just the cost. It's the loss of control over the, I guess, the fate or ultimately the fate of the developments that are going on. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you. I looked at it a little bit different too. I looked at what can I quantify and how can I take that forward. So we do know that we have a base charge for policing, and then there's extra charges on top of that. So I would take the base charge for policing and do that for the 6 areas, and anything else I would put in a pot and everybody could pay on that. But each municipality should have a quantifiable amount of money that they have to pay for the service that they're getting, because it's not fair for those that aren't getting the service to pay for somebody else's service. I'm also on roads, and let me say it's roads. I'm leaving bridges and locks in with the district because I believe that's a good place to leave them. Our locks are used by everybody. So that's something that is used by multiple agencies. And I would touch on health services, but I'm going to agree with my counselors that planning is something that I think that we could do. I think it's actually very restrictive to us when we have the provincial policies and we adhere to the provincial policies, but we have to also adhere to the district policies. And we are a lower tier and we may have a few things that are different. And I think as long as we adhere to the provincial policies, I think that we should be able to write our official plan the way that we want to. I'm just looking down my list. Roads, police. There are other services that are duplicated, but they are complementary to each other. So that would be attainable housing and economic development and emergency planning. So I think these should be left alone. However, you may want to start charging. Could we charge by household instead of, or the bill come down from district by household, and then the township decide whether or not they want to charge it by a mill rate or by a household? Because emergency planning is by household. And you could do this, you could apply the same things to, say, MPAC. We know how many roles we have. So MPAC charges should be per role, and that's what should come to our township. Then we would decide whether or not we wanted to charge it on a property base or on an assessment base. So those would be my suggestions.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mazan.
Thank you, and through you. Trying to follow your framework. I'll do my best on this, but
Don't worry.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, I can't see. I can only see Denelda at this point. So under big, I think the police is the one that I often hear about. So I would consider that there. Under the old, I was actually interested in what Councillor Jaglowitz was saying. I didn't really have something in there, but I can hear that the airport and the health unit would be two interesting ones. What's the next one? The growing, the health, it is a big one. And that's one I've heard very consistently from my colleagues and through my constituents, the hospital and the long-term care facility. So that would be good. Planning is also a consistent one. Under unsatisfactory, I would share that with Councillor Jaglowitz as well as under the shared with Councillor Bridgman. I wanted to bring up something that was, I don't know where the home is for this, and it may not even be here, but if I take this away from the discussion on current costs and impact on our dollar or on our taxes, we come back to saying the environment is first. And so when I was looking at the diagram that the district has pulled together, and I see that environment is a shared service really between the province, Muskoka Lakes, and the district. Knowing we don't have a conservation authority, knowing that there is a movement towards integrated watershed, knowing that the provinces have put money against things like flooding, my constituents, the single biggest issue that I've heard about is about water levels and water quality. Just wanting to make sure, and again, I don't know where this actually fits in, but I felt I'm not doing my job if I don't bring this forward. As the Watershed Council and the district is going through this integrated watershed management, they're trying to understand how this looks and feels. I wanted to understand the relationship with the township and how do we get the best value out of that, I would say, emerging department, and one I would say is critical to the health of our community. So I don't know where that fits.
It's probably a shared jurisdiction with the province, right? So
yeah, it is. And if you look at the diagram, right, it's under there. And I know that there's lots of discussion here. I know we're talking about climate change. I know many of these things are being done throughout, but given we say environment first, and we would like to make this something about Muskoka, I think right at this point, it's not as well funded. It's a smaller department, and yet it's possibly going to become much bigger. And I want to understand how that works. So it's really outside of maybe the dollar piece at this point, but I think the value piece for me, for my constituents, as a real frustration is not knowing where the accountability sits, particularly when there's an issue.
Okay.
So I don't know if that fits today, but certainly that's an important piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor. Your worship.
Thank you. So I think from a big perspective, significant portion of budget, roads are definitely up there. You can add them at the bottom. I've heard health again. I agree with those. Planning. The one thing I haven't heard, and there's always complaints about service levels, but solid waste. We've had bin sites removed. We've had a number of things in garbage pickup. And we do spend a considerable amount of money in that category. I just want to sort of use this as a little bit of a springboard in a number of these, because we talk about how do we affect change, what's going on. And I'm fortunate enough to sit around the table when we did a solid waste review, and we pay a different amount of solid waste than Lake of Bays, for example, or Bracebridge or Huntsville, because we have a different service level. And we've chosen and opted in on a different service level. It theoretically is available to all of us, the same service level, but we've chosen to have a lower service level in certain areas. And what I'm going down the road of is that we have, I believe, some background that on solid waste, we've created special area levies because of differentiating service levels. We know that in our sewer and water, we have volumetric rates as opposed to everybody on sewer and water paying the same. Some people use less, some people use more. Well, you pay less or you pay more at the end of the day. So we have already some background, and we have some analysis says this can be done in certain areas. So, you know, things like planning, things like OPP, things like roads, should we be charging on a per kilometer basis? And if we want to up all the roads in the Township of Muskoka Lakes, then we pay more per kilometer of our roads. So, and maybe there's a base admin section, but again, health services, how can we try and take that varying service level approach in that lens to many of these costs? And I think that may help us all get to a little bit better finish line. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Zavitz.
I was half asleep there thinking you were going to do this alphabetical, Chris.
Not so lucky. Not so lucky.
Nice guy. Now, listen, I do appreciate the opportunity, and certainly, again, I think we all hopefully view this with you know, a critical eye, a critical lens. Certainly, the way I did it, I did isolate what I felt were 6 areas that required review. And then, of course, the one where as there are 11, I didn't talk about the capital piece on the roads, but certainly I'm going to say first the ones that I thought I would personally leave, because I think they're ginormous and starting, they're almost federal, but they certainly are provincial. The whole health services piece, both health services, health unit, you know, it is so big and it's so confounded, and you know, we've seen weaknesses exposed through COVID to it. I think it's best left served with a different master, to be quite honest. The environmental piece, again, is almost as big. It's right here. It's on our doorstep. I think we need a lot of help with that. It would be something that I would suggest we could work with the other groups on a much more close knit.
And do you mean environment in terms of how Councillor Mazan categorized it, or?
I think she nailed it. I mean, like she says, people are watching us. They want to make sure that we continue to maintain a quality of water, a quality of water level, quality of water control, if I might use that that not very often used term, where there's an assurance of continuation, if you will, and not a degradation. And environmental, of course, is more than just the rain, the rain, the sun, the elements. And I just think environmental and the term on the doc here is general. I'm okay with that because I think there are some, and again, drilling back to the very beginning of this whole exercise, I think there are some things that really do need to be looked at more closely than the property assessment services. I'm kind of okay with some of that right now. So in terms of leaving things alone in Glenn's mind, health services, health unit, environment, general, the airport, and property assessment services, I'd be okay with looking at that as a second level. I do think police services, is bang on. I want to talk more about that. The community and planning, the piece, the involvement that we have with the district as part of it. This is again what we're looking at. What interplay can be better solved, better solutions than the current unrest and uncertainty of where we are getting value. Finance and corporate services, I can see that is a concern to me in terms of under G for growing. I mean, who wants to just continue to add strata after strata of, administration, which doesn't move the needle. And I'm not suggesting it doesn't. I'm just simply saying that is a cautionary tale when you add support based on the eyesight of value. Roads goes without saying. I think it does go without saying. So, social and family services, I think we need to put our arms around a lot more people and be much more sensitive. And I think that's something that we should be working with the district on. And I think they should be working closely with us. I'm concerned too about a non-program, being, I guess, a business guy. I'm concerned about a non-program category. No one's mentioned that, but can anyone explain what non-program means? Because there's a few $1 million attached to it.
I'll have to look at it, Councillor. I'm sure it's in the budget documents. I didn't look into that, but we can get the answer. And
if I might,
I don't know if Mark knows, Councillor, but
if I might just share one other thing. I think the U and unsatisfactory could be, the word could be ugly as well. I do think that this pass through that's come up quite a bit here today, it's a process more than a specific category. I think that we may be onto something, not that it's new and exciting and we've just discovered it, but there does need to be accountability to the whole pass-through process. And, you giving your money to somebody else to give it to somebody else, at what point in time does that not pass some sort of critical test or the scrutiny of interest? So, and I guess the only other thing I would say is, I go outside of my township for services today. I did. We have to go to Gravenhurst. I live in Torrance. There is no Canadian Tire store. There is no. So there, it's an interesting conundrum. The service levels where I live, I can't experience any level of quality of life if I don't go outside. So if one lives in Windermere and goes to Bracebridge, one lives in Torrance and goes to Gravenhurst, one lives in Rosso and ends up in Parry Sound. So I think that's something too that I'd like to add a sensitivity to is, we do need our, are we the outliers or the inliers? We do need our towns and our other townships in a consistent kind of basis. And we need to have more of a symbiotic kind of relationship with them. And that's, I think, again, what this is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you. Just say ditto to everything. But the last council spent, I think, over 225,000 on the police services, and we didn't get anywhere. And that it should be. And I had mentioned it. There are other municipalities that have shared service. I can take Peel Regional Police are involved, but Callan has OPP, and even though it's in appeal because it was a cost savings. I think we should have our own detachment here, and that's one of the things. I have been working on the planning with the last term of council, and we thought we almost had it through when it got the memorandum of understanding, and that sank us. But what it was is basically that condominiums and subdivisions should be downloaded to the municipalities rather than the district. If you sit at planning, you sit at committee of adjustment, you get basically a rubber stamp letter say the district don't have a problem with it. When it comes to the subdivisions, it's almost the same thing. The municipality does a lot of work on it, and I think that's something that should be done. If we were looking at roads, I would say what we should find out is how many regional roads that kilometers we have compared to all the other municipalities. Leave bridges, culverts, and that with the district. But and you know, we're talking about roads. I don't find that the district roads are as bad as some of the other roads that we maintain. So that's just something to look at. Environment should come first, and that. I'm glad that the district has a environmental officer. I would leave that there and work through that. The airport has a board. I think there's some problems with that we should be looking at. And as far as health services, yes, I think the province should be stepping up and doing more for health services than that. You know, it's sad when you look at Fairburn and they say they had 76 beds and they had to upgrade. It wasn't up to the province's standards. Then the province should come in and do the upgrade, not the Fairburn or anyone else. If they're going to legislate that you have to modernize, and they should be putting the money towards it, a real good portion of it. And I think that's just about everything. Thank you.
That's great. And Your Worship, thank you, Councillor Edwards. Your Worship, I don't know if Councillor Nishikawa has joined.
I have not seen her.
Okay.
I don't believe she's in the meeting yet.
Okay, so I think I've been I got to all councillors. So I think it's pretty, you know, there are a clear number of categories that are kind of rising to the top here. We have policing seems to be on everybody's mind. Health services is also one that's on everybody's mind. Roads is on everybody's mind, and planning's on everybody's mind. Then we have some other and I think it's fair to say the pass-through costs are on everybody's mind as well. So that gives us 5 core categories. I know there are other pieces here as well, you know, around the environment and things like that. What I would say is, if council's okay, I will take the environment with us. I will take the airport with us. Now, just a reminder, it's a fairly small cost on the district budget, but
Make a pot of coffee. So, no, don't worry. Sorry.
No worries. So is there anything else that folks want to add or double down on, or can we take the ones that I've highlighted in red to our next exercise?
I think we're probably good to move those on to the next.
Okay, that's great. And hopefully I'm not putting you to sleep, Your Worship. That's great.
No, not at all. I apologize. I thought I was smelling coffee in the background, and I thought, oh, I'd have a coffee.
Okay, no worries. So what I want to do next then is we've come up, you know, as you can see through the discussion, you know, the underlying issue set sometimes the same across councillors, sometimes a bit different. You look at the approach a little bit differently. This isn't meant to be exhaustive, but what I want to try to do is, you know, take these 5 areas and categorize them in terms of the underlying issue type that folks see. And it's perfectly fine if a service area goes across a number of issue types, and the issue types aren't exhaustive. But looking at it, for some, it's a funding issue and how the costs are recovered. For some folks, the roles and responsibility of who does what. The environment is a good example. Planning is a good example there. For some, it's just value of money, the value for money, and that I would implicitly put service level in there too. In terms of we are getting good bang for our buck, or we're getting adequate, we're getting appropriate service for how we consume the service. And then the last section is just around policy objectives, either a misalignment or it's not clear what the policy objectives are. And for example, I might say that health services could fall under that bucket, or the environment could follow under that bucket. And what I want to try to do is also look at these issues in terms of, okay, what do we, what kind of strategic approach might make sense? And so, is it a common cause? Is this something that is shared across lower tier municipalities where we think we could have, a political coalition of the willing to address it at the district council table? Is it a matter of governance? Is this something that, really it's, we may not have common cause, but it's something that our district councilors should be advocating for at the district council table? Is it a service review? Do we need to know more? Do we need to have more put on the table in terms of a fact base, and also a consideration of what alternatives there are for how that service is funded or how that service is delivered? And we should be making, we should be advocating for that at the district level. And then lastly, is legislative change. Is this only something that can be addressed by a change in legislation? I don't think many of these fall under that category, but we wanted to be prepared just in case certain things do. I'll stop there, Your Worship, because I think Councillor Zavitz has his hand up.
I believe he does. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Through you to Chris, just as a puzzle piece. So let's talk about police, and just because I'm going somewhere with this. The thing that concerns me the most about the police presence for the $6 million we pay, whatever that real number is the byproduct of a lack of police presence, and that's a perception. That's not a reality. It's a perception that for that many $1 million, we would likely have more police presence, both on the roads and on the water. But interestingly, I don't want more police on the road so I can get tickets, so that I personally can get a rolling ticket. But what we're hearing every day here is the incredible lack of respect for road rules, water rules. And so you see that's such a natural byproduct of a lack of something, and yet we believe we're paying in excess of what I shouldn't say we're paying in excess of what we should. Are we getting the value of the police presence of $6 million worth of value for our constituents? Because people pass each other on solid lines. They go on the gravel. They're driving at 100 when they should be going 50. They're putting other people at risk. So what I'm saying in your category here is that almost their roles and responsibilities, or is it, value for money? Our rules of the road are being ignored, and it is. How do you see us quantifying that?
It could quite reasonably belong there. Like what I would do is it's an issue of the type of service that you're getting from what I understood, Councillor, it's the type of service that you're getting. You might need more marine service and less, for lack of a better term, land service. And so, it's a value for money thing, which is the service level you're receiving doesn't match the service need that you would have. So that I would classify it under value for money. Does that make sense, Councillor?
I'm good with that. Thank you.
Sorry, I thought I froze there for a second. Okay. So what I want to do is we have our categories. It's not meant to be precise, but let's just start mapping these. What I really want to understand from each count, and some of you have shared that in the discussion that we just had, where we were identifying issues. But what is the fundamental issue or set of issues that you think we need to wrestle to the ground? And do you have a view as to are these things you should go together with other lower tiers? Is it something you want to sharpen? You kind of want to sharpen focus on through your delegates at district council? Is it something where let's start with a review? So let's start there. So Councillor Bridgen, I'm going to start with you again. You don't have to pick all of these. You can pick one or two of these, but just give me a sense of. You mentioned roads. You mentioned health services. On those services you identified, what do you see as the underlying issues you want to tackle?
Okay, so I think the police one is fairly clear. I think so. In terms of health services, I like to understand. Some of this is me understanding how this works, actually, but the health services, I don't understand the district then paying for these health services when they're downloaded, and then wanting each municipality to also chip in, because we're already chipping in at the district level. So I don't know how you categorize that, but that is one thing. In terms of the roads, it is maintenance, and again, the complaints on maintenance. So that would be value for the money, I guess. Although I understand we don't have enough money to do this, so I'm not sure where that lands, a lot of this, in terms of the reserve. I'm making sense there. And planning is what everybody has said. Certainly, having been involved in planning now, we're very many frustrated people that we're not able to have our own destiny on this. And so that's what the roles and responsibilities for that. So I think that's it.
Okay. And on planning services, Councillor, is that something you think you have common cause with other lower tiers, or is it a particular frustration of the township, and is something you kind of want to advocate for a service migration at the district level through district council? Where does that fit in terms of the type of approach you might want to take?
Well, I think it would be good to see if we had the other lower tiers were interested too, but even if they weren't interested, I would like to be able to look at just us having that delegated down to us then.
Okay. So I'm going to put it under both the categories here. And what about health services from your perspective? Is that something that is common cause, is also a shared concern, or is it something else? It's again at the district table, or maybe a service review to kind of understand who is doing what before you make a determination as to how you approach it.
Well, I think it's probably the same thing. I don't know how other groups are feeling about health services, but I think here you're going to run into the issues of particular municipalities can't shoulder the cost of some of these things that are coming down, but are in their area. So it has to be a shared service, but I'm not sure it has to be shared, quote, equally.
Yeah.
Or based on our impact, based on our values. So that's sort of my questions around that.
Okay. And roads, is it a common cause issue, or is it something that is particular to the township?
Well, I think it's a common cause issue. That would be my guess.
Okay. Great. Okay, thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Okay, I'm just gonna keep this very simple, because that's the only way I think we're gonna succeed at this.
You also know your facilitator is very simple, so you try to keep it easy on them.
Yes, yeah. I just tried to keep up with the facilitator. Thank you. No, so basically it's two things. I have no problems with roads. I have no problems with health services. I do have problems with the environment, but that's just too big of a nut to crack. Basically one of the things I ran on, and I've realized that, you know, it's a hard one to crack, and we're not going to do, what can we achieve? I don't, on the planning side, there seems to, so we should be doing everything for ourselves on this, not relying on the township. We got the provincial policies. Why do we need the planning of the district to be involved? So what we need to do is a service level review on that deliverable, on the planning, and fully understand, rather just not generally, but what value is I think we talked earlier, delivering the best value for our constituents' dollar. So this is what I'm saying for planning. What is the value? What is it costing us for the district to deliver that value for our constituents? And why aren't we doing it all here in the township of Muskoka Lakes? The police services, the same thing. We pay a significant amount of money. We pay, and that's all deemed, you know, by assessment. You know, that's just our luck of the draw. But again, we need a service level just for that service. How much time, what is the delivery that the police are giving for our township? So I can explain to my constituents, we're paying this much, but look at all the value we're getting.
Mm.
And then approach it from this. And then the pass-throughs have always bothered me when I was in business. If you're not adding value, then maybe you shouldn't be part of the process. Yep. And maybe if we can look at those and maybe we can save some money. And then once we can figure out that, then we can figure out how we reduce our burden to our constituents. That's all I have. I just want to keep it simple, and those are the points.
And the pass-throughs, is this an irritant for other lower tiers, or is it, again, is it something specific to Muskoka Lakes?
Anybody, if we have one person in the district that is just taking a bill, rewrapping it, sending it down, attending a couple of meetings, heck, we could just take that head count down to ours and do it. I mean, what value is it? And that's small peanuts, but then we can get right into the service delivery. They're accountable to us, not to the district. You understand? If we own it, then we become the customer, not the district.
Yeah. Okay. Understood. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jaglowitz.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not fully prepared, but I'll do my best on this. I didn't understand this chart, but I'm starting to. So the first thing is, when you talk about common cause, I think you have to understand there are 3 municipalities that have common views: the smaller, the townships, and 3, the towns, and they're at odds with each other. So when you talk about common cause, 3 to 3s, there's nothing common. So that's a problem right there.
Yeah.
When you talk about governance, so these are going to apply to most of the areas I'm going to deal with. We have the same thing, except there we don't have 3 to 3. We have 12 to 2. We have the towns with 12 votes, the townships with 10. So that's a difficult area. When we come to service review, in my view, the only one that requires a review is planning. I think it probably does require a service review. I'm going to leave legislative change out at the moment. So then let's go down to the issues. So policing is clearly a value for money, a funding model, roles and responsibilities. I mean, it fits into all the categories.
Yeah.
And what we need at the township, we need our own police services board, and we need to set the service levels. And what's going on there right now, just to give you a background, the province is redoing the police service boards, and the district is taking a leading role, and it wants to control everything. It wants to appoint all the reps. It wants to retain control. I sit on the Finance and Corporate Services Committee, which is responsible for policing. And we never, ever discuss service levels. All we do is get a bill, pay it, see the stats. I raised an issue at one meeting. Let's talk about service levels. They say, don't you dare, because we don't want to increase the cost. So that area is I think it's been talked about a lot. When we get into planning, health service, we talk about roles and responsibilities. I think that's clear in planning. And when we talk about roles and responsibilities for health, that's a provincial responsibility. That's not a lower tier responsibility, and it's not really an upper tier responsibility.
Yep.
When you talk about value for money, once again, the pass-through costs belong there, policing belongs there, roads belong there. So, but this is a difficult chart. So I hope you've captured some of that. I have no idea where airport fits into this. So I just left it out. Thank you.
It is, yeah, okay, so that's fair. I mean, it sounded like from those that raised the airport, it's not so much a, how much it costs, it's whether or not it's probably governance related. So, more a value for money thing, or, role and responsibilities thing between the district council and the independent board of the airport.
Yeah, if the airport has its own board, then maybe the airport should be supported by the area municipalities rather than through the district or something. To see that's the problem. Another interesting fact is when the province downloaded a lot of the provincial highways, it could download those to the District of Muskoka because it had a district to download. So Peninsula Road is a district road, but when you cross into Seguin, 632 is a provincial highway because Seguin doesn't have an upper tier. Therefore, they have no place to download it. So you can see what's happening because we have this upper tier.
Yeah,
things are downloaded where we pay a usually large share, and also they then strike out and do things because they're not really responsible to the taxpayer. So that gets you into that. You brought in the financial and corporate services. I think what was meant by that is that the district is building and getting larger and larger because it really has no direct responsibility to the taxpayer. Thank you.
Excellent. Councillor Kelly.
Okay, thank you again. I guess I'm going to follow on Councillor Roberts' theory that simpler is better. I don't know if we need a police services board here. I don't even know what that means. But I do know that at some point in time, there's a level of service that we should expect. Forget cost. There's a level of service that we should expect as residents, summer residents or full-time residents from the OPP. I don't know what that level is. I don't know what the level was set at when the last engagement was undertaken with the OPP. But we ought to be able to quantify that. And by that I mean there's got to be some way, some metrics around how to decide what adequate service is from policing. Is it a response time no more than 15 minutes during high crime times? Is it patrolling the most? I know from Peninsula Road, being a part-time resident on that road, I believe there's been deaths on that road from traffic accidents, speeding, crossing double lines. I don't want to straighten the road and I don't want to take the hills out, but we need to do a better job of enforcing and making a high visibility presence known to people, not in January on a snow day, in the middle of June on a Sunday afternoon or on a Saturday afternoon when everybody seems to want to go real fast around those curves. So I think we need to set expectation for a service level first. Measure that against the service level that we're presently getting, figure out what we need to do to the current service level in order to hit our expectations, and then only then sit down and figure out what would that cost, and is it possible to get it from the budget that we currently have. I really do think that that's how we're going to answer most of these questions. Same thing, quite frankly, with the road maintenance. There's a downside to making the roads pristine is that we'll probably need more police to patrol them. Right now, the limiting factor seems to be how much abuse you want to put on your car. But I don't know what the cost is, but I do know that many of the district roads are are brutal all year round. They need to be addressed. They need to be fixed. I don't know enough about road building or road maintenance, but I guarantee you that somewhere somebody's quantified the difference between a Daytona 500 surface and a regular township road surface. Where do we want to fall in there? And when? And then build from there. Once we establish the service level, what are we getting now? What would it take to bridge that gap? And can we do it, just by sheer negotiation or cost sharing or service level expectation as part of the contract? I don't know what the answer is yet. I just know that we owe it to our constituents to address service levels first. What do you need to get? What are you getting? How much can we save if we change our, maybe we're already spending more than we need to. Who knows? Until we look at what the expected service level is, how are we going to hit that number? And then who's going to help pay for it? Is this something that's best shared with other departments? That's the last consideration I have. If it's not best shared with other lower tier, then we got to take a look at what it would take to do it on our own. So I don't know whether you just put that in that box and you're good. You're on mute.
Sorry, my kids are coming home from school, so they're particularly loud. No, it makes a ton of sense. And where you're coming from is we need to have the facts and evidence in front of us before we then, and relative to the service we're getting and the service we want. And then based on that, figure out what needs to be improved. And it may be something that is improved at the district level, or we may need to look at different ways of delivering that service. Is that a fair?
And the last thing, if I may, I think I've said all along, and I'm just having listened to myself for the last 3 minutes, we'll never get through all of this all at once. We need to prescribe this almost on a, here are the 5 big service issues or 5 service components. Once a year for the next 5 years, we're going to address each one, and then we'll do it all over again. We'll cycle through it, or whatever the next council wants to do, but we'll set a stage so that this becomes part of a recurring, ongoing kind of annual review. If it's an even number, it must be roads.
Yeah.
And because I don't think there's any possibility we could do a thorough enough job of this on any more than 1 or 2 in any given year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you. I don't think I can add anything more to the discussion, except for that if you look at it, the Township of Muskoka Lakes, we are #1 in assessment. And by that, the cost for the services, when it's based by assessment, we pay the most for. But when you look at delivering that service, the value for that service, it's delivered by household, and we're 4th. So we are paying the highest amount of money for the 4th out of 6 service that we get. So there's a discrepancy there that needs to be addressed. It's not fair that our homeowners are carrying 1/3 of the load of the entire district, because that's what it basically comes down to, is homeowners. So I would like to see that explored more, so that we have actual numbers to go to the district with. And other than that, I would agree with what my other counselors have said so far. And I would especially like to agree with the fact that our official plan should reflect our needs, as long as it complies with the provincial policies. I think if we're a little bit different than the district, I think that's a good and healthy thing.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Hayes. Councillor Mizan.
Thank you, and through you. Oh, sorry, not through you. Thank you.
You just promoted me, Councillor. Thank you.
Sorry, my kids are coming home too. So I actually really liked the idea and was glad it came up about scheduling. I think it was Peter who brought that up, and having some kind of a schedule incorporated on an ongoing basis that have the mechanism in place, so that this isn't something that just comes upon people. So I like that idea. I agree with much of what is being said today. So I'm going to go back to the part that I brought up about the environment, simply because I'm trying to, and again, I'm trying to figure out how these things fit into the boxes. So as I started out, I know that the direction from the provincial government has been to have the district focus on something called an integrated watershed management, which I think they are currently, trying to do and trying to understand how to even go about this. This is something that is new. So yes, it follows, I think, under policy objectives, but I would see this as being one of the biggest value for money to say, okay, we don't have a conservation authority, but we've heard loud and clear that protecting our natural resources is key to the success of Muskoka as a whole. So I do think it's a common cause. I think that people don't necessarily see the value for money out of that today, but I think that's already been acknowledged. And so there are things that are in play. I think understanding the roles and responsibilities of each of the jurisdictions and how to preserve and protect is important. I don't know, I see that it was put into the same box as planning over there, and absolutely within our municipality, land use planning is a significant piece. But then when you look to things like climate change, you look at roads, roads are a significant contributor to, I would say, degradation, but we also need to look at our infrastructure. So, and understand roads, bridges, all culverts. I think there's standards that are set, and understand this better. So for me, I think if I could go back and say, some of our tax dollars are being spent against these types of thinking and projects and understanding and preparing for a sustainable future against climate change, then I feel like then that's something that I could get people rallied behind. So it's a different way of approaching this, but I figured I'd just pick on one topic.
No, it's interesting. So I put it across the board on common cause because I think it's nascent enough that it's not something that has years of buildup under it. And there's still, it sounds like there are collaborative tables and there's an opportunity to influence where this would go. But there's a lot of outstanding questions in terms of if environment is our priority and the aspects of environment in terms of, everything from water quality, climate change, who's going to fund what in order to make sure that we're on top of that? Who's going to do what to make sure we're on top of that? How do we make sure that we're getting valued for the services we decide to put around the environment? And then just, are we are we clear on what the objectives here and what objectives we're working towards, both as, Muskoka and lower tiers within Muskoka, but also working with with the province, which has a significant hand in all of this, certainly from a policy and a regulatory perspective. Is that fair?
Yes, I do. I think this transcends everything, and I think the timing is correct in the sense that it is a common cause, and how this is governed and setting up accountabilities in this area, I think is going to be a really important piece. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Your Worship.
Thank you. From a legislative change perspective, I think any of the pass-throughs, I know you have them also as a common cause, but I think any of those theoretically might require some legislative changes as we work our way through those. From a policy perspective, it will come down to roads, I think, a little bit, because we certainly need to identify service levels. The one thing that is in the back of my mind, it was about 4 years ago now, maybe 5 years ago, we started down the road of a service review on roads at the District of Muskoka. And it didn't really go anywhere because there was about 30% of the roads that were recommended to be downloaded. And we had some of our own people saying, no, Walker's Point Road needs to remain a district road. Ferndale Road heading out to Shamrock and Muskoka Lakes Golf Course needs to remain a district road. So as much as there was a recommendation to download some roads, It got rejected at the lower tiers, and it got rejected by some of this council. But I certainly don't have an issue with re-looking at that. From a value for money, and again, policy, I think we also need to continue to look at solid waste. We are in the process of redoing right now our solid waste contract. And I believe that there will be a new potential award of a contract coming to District Council. But looking at that, is it the right service level in everything we do? Governance from a police perspective, I mean, it's interesting, I hear we're talking about what level of service do we want, what's the value for the money. I think my understanding is that's the actually impetus for having a police services board to actually be able to control some of that service level and to make those changes. The one question that I do want to get final clarification on, by the way, because I've heard about maybe we need more Marine unit stuff. My belief and my understanding at this point is Marine unit actually does not get paid for by the District of Muskoka. It's actually a provincial cost. It stays with the province and it gets split across the entire province. So we're not paying for our Marine unit. We're getting free dollar for dollar value through that. But I want to confirm that as we go forward, because some of those things help us move in the right direction. And again, in all of this stuff, I think we need to try and find common cause and then differentiation of service levels where we can, which will help build our rationale to the district to modify the way we bill to a lower tier. And I think that's important. You know, it's interesting, you know, we get extra value for money because for water and sewer costs, it's only 8% of the actual cost. We're gaining extra value in Muskoka Lakes when they have to rebuild the Port Carling plant or the Bala plant. That's being shared and cost by everybody else and everybody who's on sewer and water. So, you know, we talk about the scales and Muskoka Lakes pays for everything. There are also examples of where we benefit from anything. So I always like to make sure we understand the full spectrum of where we're going down roads to understand the balance. So I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Harding. And to your words, I mean, all that clarity is wonderful. I'm going to go right back to seeing to the beginning. I mean, it's sort of a conundrum attached to a dichotomy in that, that's that adage, what's in your wallet? I mean, we essentially pass through 50% of our taxpayers' funding to the district, and then another 30% to provincial education, leaving that little 20% piece for us, which is where we as an elected group of officials are performance graded by our residents. So, I think this is really this township trying to help the district spend our contribution, is it not? And I think to that end, Chris, I certainly agree with my peers when I look at the categorization. I absolutely would vote 100% with these fine folks right now to where we are. But I think it bears remembering that we too are a pass through. This township, our finance department blows through 80 cents of every dollar it leaves the building. It comes in and goes out. And so what value do we have? I think we need to look at ourselves. We need to look at our own piece of this puzzle, because it is it is really interesting. We don't hang on to that 80 cents as long as we can and derive 1.2% interest per annum. How can we? We try, but everybody tries to drag that as far as they can. So to my point, we aren't talking about $1 here. We're talking about 20 cents from our perspective, but 80 cents that leaves us. So perhaps we should be talking to Doug Ford about education as well, because that is also an area of scrutiny. Why would we be looking at police services when 30% of my tax dollar? I've never put a child in school here, but here's your kids coming home from school. So I think this is contextual, and I hope we can keep it way up here, Chris, because I think that we need to keep reminding ourselves of what the bogey is. And as it relates to your boxes, your issue types, I'm fine with everything where we are. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And last but certainly not least, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much, and that's through the mayor. First of all, when they were talking, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Solid waste, and that because we're filling the landfills too fast. I had a call this summer, and I'll talk to the mayor about it afterwards. But you know, we're not picking up blue boxes at the campsites. In that it's a commercial, so everything is going into the dump. And if you look at all the tent and trailer parks around the district, there's a lot of garbage that should be diverted. We should be looking at that. I think that's one thing the district should be looking at. Legislative changes. The funding model for the police would have to be a legislative change. That's for sure. If they were going to do something, which I doubt very much that they will do. And I think everything else is just about in there. Value for your money. We're not getting value for our money with the district being involved with subdivisions and everything else like that. And what really irks me in a way is the townships got voted down when we're talking about going back up to what the with the development charges. So we're any shortfall in that, we're paying 31% if you look at your other chart of, and yet we are also paying for the district planning department sitting there overlooking the plans of subdivision. And where are all the subdivisions? Bracebridge, Ravenhurst, and Huntsville. So we get very, very few. So that's one thing I've been working on. I don't know how we'll get that changed, but I think they should be picking up the tab for that. And I hope the next term of council, when it comes up, they go up to full development charges. And that because our taxpayers are funding any shortfall. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So, Your Worship, here's where I think we're landing. And I know this is not a perfect analysis, but what's becoming clear to me through the conversation is two things. One, I think there are enough questions around the police services service levels, what the service levels should be, and then how those service levels ought to be funded, that there needs to be some sort of review, objective review of that, so that there is a clear fact base that answers, because I get the sense there's a lot of questions around that. On planning services, I think it's clear that service review and looking at whether or not that responsibility should continue to be kind of as is or fully migrated down to the township makes sense. And then the same on roads and solid waste. It's more about understanding who has what are the service levels, and then what's who's the appropriate level to be dealing with those, and how do we fund those. That makes sense. All these things may have common cause, but I think there's some, kind of first principles, evidence that is required to really understand the land, kind of the service landscape that you're dealing with before you can figure out how to attack those things. I think the second thing that is becoming clear to me is that there are areas that are potentially common cause or are common cause, and environment and the and how it's emerging and how critical it is to the district, and its economic and its social and its ecological viability is something where that is likely shared across, and there's an opportunity to influence what that looks like, from funding to roles and responsibilities, value for money, and policy objectives. I think the pass-through issues are also something that could be, is likely common cause, and something you can try to work with the other lower tiers to address at the district level. And then health services, well, it could be very well subject to a service review, This is something that may not need a third party. This may be something that working with district council, you can charge for a specific review done by staff and with oversight from council, understand who does what in that system and where the district may be picking up some of the freight that is quite frankly the responsibility of the province itself. And so that's kind of based on the discussion and the questions or kind of the dynamics that people see at play. That's how I would categorize. There's a series of services where we do need that review. We do need that third party independent establishment of the fact base and what models could be at play. And there are other things that are probably common cause, more political in nature. There is an opportunity for us to work with others in the district to kind of work through the issues that are at play. Then we have some minor things around, I guess, principally around the airport. I don't get the sense, it may be a source of annoyance, but I don't get the sense that it is, one of the bigger fish that council may want to try to fry at the district at the moment. So that's how I'd categorize what I've heard. I'd be interested in yours and others' reactions to it, and I'll pause there. I see that Councillor Jagowitz has his hand up.
Yeah, I see the same. And Councillor Jagowitz.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think you summarized that well, except for I believe the health services requires more definition. I just looked at the district budget, and there's about 11.5 million plus the contribution to the hospital reserve. And I just wanted to give you an idea of what's in that thing, because I think you should break it out. The first item is the Pines, which is the existing long-term care home. That's about 2 million. That's in place now, and I think it's probably should remain as is. The second item in there is the health unit, which we talked about. It's one of those flow through. The third item we haven't talked about is Paramedic Services, which is 6.2 million. That's lumped in that category. That's the ambulance service. So I think that should be broken out. That's significant enough. And then there are two new things. One is Fairvern, which Fairvern used to be a separate board. And in the district budget, there would be a contribution to them for the redevelopment. But that's now changing at the district, and the district has decided to pull it in-house and make it part of the overall. So that's a tricky issue. My view is that, just so you're aware, it's my understanding the province mandates that each district have a long-term care facility, which the Pine qualifies, but it doesn't mandate a second. But by them pulling it in, we're really expanding the service without much discussion about how it's to be paid other than on the general levy. In that 11 million, the hospital isn't there because they're putting it into a reserve fund over 15 years to come up with 60 million. And that hospital has its own board. That's, again, a pass-through cost. The district will have no role in managing the hospital or adding value to it. So I see the hospital, because it's not really in these budgets yet, you might put it under health services, but it really belongs as pass-through. That's why I think you should remove the term health services and replace it with Fairvern Hospital Paramedics. And give some thought to it. It's not a homogeneous number.
No, it's not. And you raise an excellent point in terms of, I have the note here, and I've been taking notes on the side as well, but, health services, what is in that category when we talk about it? The reason why, the local share contribution that the district is making is important, well, because that is ostensibly a function of, for lack of a better term, a bit of a provincial download down to municipalities to cover, to cover provincial underfunding. And then
Chris, there's a second downloading happening. Normally, the local share is paid for by the municipality that has the hospital, okay, and by private donations. So both Huntsville and Bracebridge have convinced the district to have the district take the responsibility for that local share. And that again is that 12 to 10 vote. I'm not saying that's the way the vote was, but you know, that's the disturbing part of healthcare. Not that it's being downloaded, but it's being downloaded right onto the assessment tax base.
Yeah.
So anyway,
How that cost is being syndicated. Absolutely.
And then, as was raised before, the Bracebridge Hospital fundraising group are probably going to come to the township, ask for money there. Then they're going to go to our key taxpayers and ask for personal donations. So anyway, I don't know what we do with that. Anyway, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Your worship, other perspectives on how I summarize things, and then I can, if there are any disagreement on how I summarize things, and then we can talk next steps.
No, I think Chris did a great job of summarizing and also guiding us through today. I think you're accurate, and I appreciate Councillor Jaglett's comments as well. I guess my sort of overview where we could go from here is you take today, sort of write a little more detailed report up for us. You know, when you talk about a service review, is some of them, you know, are we asking the district to do a service review on policing, or are we getting an independent consultant to help advise us on, is this a change? Is this not a change? Because some of it, we might get a different answer from the district necessarily. So would love your input on where we go on some of these next steps, and how we might look at that. You know, I do know from a roads perspective, I think we just need to dust off the service review and try and resurrect that for conversation. But would love your input, digesting everything today to try and give us some actionable items. I'm not sure we need another special meeting of this. I think that you could potentially come right to our General and Finance Committee with sort of an overview report of where we're going.
Okay, and that is in terms of next steps, what we will do. We will put that report together. We'll have advice on how you approach those things. We have a general framework to work with, but what does that mean in terms of, you know, tangible steps? You know, is that a district level activity? Is that something you undertake yourself? And what does one foot in front of the other look like to pursue these? But I think we have a good amount of clarity in terms of where we want to focus today. And some of the questions that we need answered. So, you know, as we, you know, for those things that fall in to actually both, you know, kind of the share, the common cause or the review bucket, you know, part of our report will be, you know, here are the key strategic questions that need to be answered as you go about addressing these issues.
Yeah, Councillor Zavitz, you have a question?
Thank you, sir, and through you. I'd be interested, Chris, in the timing piece. We've started the campfire. We've sat around. We've had our discussions. You know, we're coming into our budget period, and I know some of this information will augur into our dialogue and our mindsets as we establish. You know, we have things like a community improvement plan that we'll be contemplating very, very soon, and master plans of a few different perspectives. What do you see as timing on, not to pin your ears back, but what do you see as, is this a 30-day, 60-day experience where you can come to GNF and in November, or is this next year, or? Thank you.
I would hope November. Let me put those words in Chris's mouth.
Yeah, I mean, I think contractually we're coming with the report in November. I'll just I'll work with Derek offline to get you a definitive time frame. But you know, in terms of putting the report together, you know, we'll need a couple of weeks to do that and probably, you know, cycle it. And but you know, I don't think November is unrealistic, and I don't want to prejudge what you already have on your workload for November. So I'll clear that with the CAO.
Okay, perfect. I think November is appropriate, and I think we'd all like to see it there. So great, appreciated. Chris, I think that sort of reaches our end of our discussion. Thank you. And Michael and John, thank you for your input today and joining us to get us to this stage. For council, thank you all. Again, we are starting to unpack some of the heavy lifting issues, and trying to really understand where we can achieve the best value for our taxpayers in everything we do. So certainly, I think appreciated and a good exercise as we move forward. Any other comments from anybody before I read the final resolutions? Mr. Fenn, Michael, over to you.
Just one quick point, Your Worship. One of the other things that came up with the discussion here today was some consideration of what you might call cost avoidance, particularly in policing and in healthcare. And I thought your point about what's considered provincial policing responsibility and what's considered local is a really good one that we might not have spent enough time on. I know in Northern Ontario, that's the big arm wrestle that takes place between municipalities and the OPP over who pays for what, and things like forensics and water and policing in areas outside of the municipal boundaries and things of that kind figure very prominently in that discussion. So I think we'll take your suggestion there and have a look at it, because that's the kind of thing that shrinks the size of the pie without and allows you to increase services on the other guy's nickel, which is always worthwhile. And on healthcare, the throne speech has made it pretty clear that there's changes coming in long-term care, both in terms of standards and in terms of wage rates. So some of what's currently the situation may in fact not improve.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I have a resolution moved by Councillor Hayes, seconded by Councillor Jagowitz. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021-140 to confirm the proceedings of council be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. All those in favor? It's carried. Finally, moved by Councillor Kelly, second by Councillor Mizan. Be it resolved that council adjourn at, what's my clock, 4:28 p.m. And the next regular meeting of council will be held on Wednesday, October 13th, 2021 at 1 p.m. electronically in the council chambers, municipal offices in Port Carling, Ontario. And we're going to try and start at 1 p.m. this coming next Wednesday. It's on your shoulders, Mr. Zavitz. Get us through the morning quickly. All those in favor? There we go. That is carried. Thank you very much, Council. And again, Strategy Corp, thank you very much for having us here today. And everybody have a good afternoon, evening, and the rest of your week.